Donald Trump continues to lead in the polls for the Republican nomination. A major player in the conservative universe is standing athwart history and yelling stop. The iconic conservative magazine National Review is devoting their latest issue to the conservative case against Trump's campaign. And David French from the National Review joins us now. David, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
David, it's no secret that the National Review hasn't been a fan of Donald Trump. So why did it take so long to get this full issue out?
Well, now's the time. I mean, this is when people are paying attention. You know, policy wonks and the very small group of Americans who are really, addicts of political news have been following this unfolding Trump story for a very long time. But now is when it really matters. I mean, we're less than 2 weeks away from the Iowa caucuses. New Hampshire's next soon after that. Then we're going to be heading down south to the SEC primary very soon. So now is the time to make the case.
And the truth is, it seems like criticism from conservatives has been rather muted towards Trump. It feels like people are scared of Trump because when they do criticize him, then his popularity just gets that much stronger. So do you think that you're speaking for other people who are too afraid to let their views be known?
I don't know that there are other people in the rank and file conservative movement that are too afraid, but we thankfully have a platform, a big platform to make our case. I do think that some of the other GOP candidates, quite frankly, have been pretty intimidated by Trump. Recently, however, Cruz and Trump, their conflict has gone the political equivalent of nuclear, but many others seem to have kind of shrunk away from Trump after they saw what he did to some of their competitors. But, look, I mean, the National Review for 60 years has been articulating a case for conservative principles based on conviction, based on a regard for truth, a regard for, a deep and respectful commitment to intellectual engagement on the core conservative principles and convictions that unite the very broad movement. And so that's why we did an issue that took people from outside of National Review, people who criticize National Review, people who disagree with our writers frequently, and put them all together in this one issue.
What's your biggest concern about Donald Trump potentially making it into the White House?
My biggest concern is I tend to believe that past performance can be a predictor of future results. And I've been involved in conservative activism, conservative causes for 20 plus years. And not once during that time did I say to myself, well, thank God Donald Trump is with us, because he was not there. In fact, often he was on the other side. Now, I know in the last 6 months, he has really stoked a lot of support, particularly in a part of the American electorate that both parties have done a terrible job reaching. But if they think he's going to be there on issues like immigration, if he's going to be there on issues like the Second Amendment, on protecting religious liberty, on foreign policy, why do they believe that? There's no past record to indicate that his future performance is going to be at all satisfactory. In fact, many things that he said are just flat out wrong. I mean, you're not going to defeat ISIS by killing terrorist family members, for example. You're just not going to do that. And while everyone on the conservative movement believes we need a completely new approach to border security, the idea that you're going to say to our Kurdish allies, for example, sorry you can't come to this country, when they're the ones fighting and bleeding and stopping ISIS, simply because our Kurdish allies are Muslim, that's wrong. That's dangerous. And so these ideas that he's advancing are, it's not even as if he's a newfound convert to conservatism, because many of the ideas that he's advancing aren't conservative at all, and indeed are bad for the country. So
well let me just stop you there for a while.
Where his supporters are coming from, we do not agree with his solutions.
I mean, to be fair, he's not the only one, though. You could look at Ted Cruz, who also at one point suggested only allowing Christian Syrian refugees into the country and discriminating based on religion, who also talked about carpet bombing civilians. So how do we explain for that?
Well, if you look at actually Cruz's proposals, what he's talking about is he's been talking about a moratorium on refugees from conflict zones when we know, for example, that ISIS is trying to infiltrate the ranks of migrants. And as far as permitting Christians in under the law regarding refugee and asylum applications, religion can in fact be considered because Christians are facing particular persecution. So under the law, the existing law, that's a defensible statement. It's nothing like a blanket statement that says, if you're Muslim, there's a temporary ban on you, no matter how much you're out.
But explain this to me, because I just don't quite see the difference between saying only Christians can come in or no Muslims are allowed in. You're either way. You are discriminating against non-Christians.
Christians can come in. He said, when we're looking at a particular refugee population from a particular country, when we know our enemies are trying to infiltrate that that refugee population, that we can take a look at the religion of the applicant. Now, that's in the law. That's in the law. Under the law, you can and should. If someone is asserting religious persecution, you do, in fact, take into account their religion. There's a vast difference between looking at a population of Syrian migrants and refugees and saying we're going to draw distinctions there versus the entire Muslim world, including our allies, the people who are fighting on the ground, fighting and bleeding and dying against ISIS, and saying even of those allies, you can't come into the country. There's a big difference there.
All right, well, I don't quite see the distinction, but let's move on to some other things, too. I want to bring up this tweet here from Greta Van Susteren, who is retweeting what the Trump spokesperson said. Why didn't the NRO do to Romney what they're doing to Trump when Romney was the basis of Obamacare? Ouch. What's your response to that?
You know, look, there is a big difference between looking at somebody who has a track record of governance, who had run in 2008, had run in 2012, had articulated a plan, a healthcare plan that was in keeping when he was running for the presidency in 2012, that was in keeping with core conservative values. We're not saying that you can't change your mind. Nobody can change their mind. What we're saying is that when a person has had an entire lifetime record, primarily on the other side, not on one issue, not on one policy, but again and again, if you look at life, if you look at gun control, if you look at immigration, if you look at health care, again and again and again, it's on the other side. Now, in the last 6 months, he's partially switched on some of that. And to say to conservatives that you should trust that you should make him the leader of the free world on the basis of positions sometimes he's changed even within the scope of this race, substantially different from Mitt Romney saying a plan that I tried in Massachusetts is not the plan that I want to do for the entire country. That's apples and oranges. So I don't think it's the slightest bit hypocritical, and there is no ouch there. We're not asking for absolute purity of all politicians. We're saying with Donald Trump, there is a track record there that is staggeringly on the other side.
Now, is this not taking into account, though, the fact that Donald Trump does enjoy such strong support publicly and in the polls, right? It's one thing for the National Review and its writers and others within the conservative community to express their opinion, those who actually can get their opinions on the pages of the National Review. But is that somehow in denial of the fact that voters, constituents, supposedly, according to the polls, like what they're seeing?
It's in recognition of the fact that people are liking what they're seeing. If nobody liked what they're seeing, why would we waste one bit of effort talking about Trump's candidacy? It's the fact that we're very close to the Iowa caucuses. He's the national frontrunner. I think if you held a national primary right today, he'd win in a landslide. We're recognizing the fact that he has drawn an awful lot of people under his banner. And we're making an argument to those folks, and we're making an argument to my friends and neighbors. I live in Tennessee, in the middle of what I would call Trump country right now. If you had a primary in my community, Trump would win it in a landslide. So when I'm talking about Trump, I'm talking to my own friends and neighbors, people who are justifiably frustrated with the GOP, not just frustrated, furious with the GOP. And the argument we're making is we are totally with you on that fury. And the argument that I've made, I'm totally with you on the fury, but channel the fury towards the right candidate. Don't channel the fury towards the wrong candidate. And that's an argument that many of us are making. In
that sense, why not come out and support one specific candidate rather than putting all efforts behind being anti-Trump?
Well, we've had a number of our writers have supported preferences for different candidates for different reasons. And I feel pretty confident. I mean, I of course can't speak for my boss, but I expect at some point National Review will endorse. But the more urgent matter is right now what we have is a battle over a singular frontrunner who has captured the imagination of millions of people. And so we're trying to make an argument to that millions of people that there are better standard bearers out there than him, someone who will advance your values, share your values, advance your interests, be in your corner far more effectively than Donald Trump.
Now, do you feel that the National Review has the influence to change voters' minds?
I know we have the influence to change many voters' minds. We've had that influence for 60 years. Whether it'll be enough.
Is it still there, though?
Whether it'll be enough to change, to swing the outcome of the elections, that remains to be seen. It's a media environment where there are a lot of different platforms. Donald Trump is right now the king of media. I mean, he's probably going to get in front of more people defending himself from National Review than will actually read what we write in National Review. He has an enormous media platform. So will it be enough? Who knows? But the calculation isn't, will this definitely work? It's, we must try.
I just want to bring up a piece here in the New Republic, too, that says that the National Review is partly responsible for the creation of Trump, for this alternative wing of the Republican Party and of conservative views. And it says, in truth, the relationship between National Review and Donald Trump is like that of Victor Frankenstein and his monster. Horror-stricken by what the monster is doing, Frankenstein might deny his own creation and say that it has a will of its own. But without Frankenstein, there is no monster. And without a conservative movement that fostered and indulged white identity politics, there is no Donald Trump.
I think that's a load of garbage, to be honest. National Review is the last publication to foster, quote-unquote, white identity politics. And in fact, the bizarro world trolls of the alt-right come after us every day. Believe you me, you should see my Twitter feed. It's full of these alt-right guys tweeting from their mom's basement in Austria. No, what we have done is we've articulated a very clear case about, and many of our writers have done this, about the manifest and manifold failures of the GOP political class. And there are a number of politicians who have run specifically against those failures, who've succeeded, who are not named Donald Trump. For example, Ted Cruz. For example, Marco Rubio. If you look at Rubio, he's the original Tea Party senator. He's Tea Party 1.0. Ted Cruz is Tea Party 2.0. So again and again, we have endorsed and supported people who are not Donald Trump, who have presented a coherent critique against the Washington political class, against the failures of the Washington political class, and for the defense of the Constitution, a strong approach to national security, and have clearly articulated conservative principles. It has nothing at all to do with white identity politics.
So what do you do if Donald Trump does indeed win the nomination?
What do? I vote for Donald Trump. I'm not one of these Republicans who said, or conservatives who says, well, I'm just going to take my ball and go home. As much as I don't trust that Donald Trump is going to go into office and advance the conservative values that he claims to have recently embraced, and as many concerns as I have about some of his other positions, he's not in the same league as a Hillary Clinton, who I believe should be indicted before the election for her mishandling of classified information, or a Bernie Sanders, a socialist who just proposed one of the largest government expansions and tax increases in human history, and he's just getting started with his socialist platform. So there's tremendous differences between the parties. This is about the GOP primary, in my mind. What do we do in the GOP primary? Once the GOP primary is over, it's an entirely different political race.
I just want to bring up a tweet here from Donald Trump himself today. Says the failing National Review magazine has just been informed by the Republican National Committee that they cannot participate in debate. I'm not quite sure what that means. Do you?
Right. We were co-sponsoring a Republican debate next month, and the RNC asked us to drop from the debate, which is completely understandable. Haven't met any or talked to anyone at National Review who's mad about that. We made a decision to make a clear statement against Donald Trump, and there's going to be consequences that flow from that. And I think it's an appropriate decision. I'm not upset about it. Some people may disagree with me on that at National Review, but I think it's completely fair. Decisions have consequences, and that's one consequence of the decision.
All right, David, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And you can read the National Review's case against Trump in the articles in our resource well below. And stick around, there's more coming up on HuffPost Live.